Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the fascinating teachings of Life Qinyuan founder Guy Shufeng. We're going to be specifically focusing on his text, Practicing Self-Improvement in Daily Living. Now you might be thinking that true enlightenment means you have to pack up and retreat to some remote mountaintop somewhere, right? Well, think again. Guy Shufeng actually argues that the most profound spiritual growth happens right here, right now, in our totally mundane daily actions. So let's dive into how that works. Okay, let's dive into it. Shufeng opens with this absolutely wild paradox. He says, the closer a place is to you, the farther the journey seems. The simplest melody requires the most rigorous training. It's such a brilliant way to establish right off the bat that true self-improvement isn't about these grand, sweeping life changes. We always tend to look far and wide for ways to get better, but this tells us that mastering the basics, rigorous, unwavering attention to the simple things right in front of us is actually the hardest journey of all. And honestly, because mastering those basics is so incredibly tough, the text explicitly warns us against aiming too high or chasing these completely unreachable pie-in-the-sky ideals. You know the feeling, right? When we obsess over some distant, perfect version of ourselves, we totally miss doing the actual work today. Shufeng points out that perfecting the structure of your life demands dedicated practice in the smallest stuff. Literally, every single word you speak and every single deed you perform is the actual training ground for your spiritual growth. So what does this actually look like in real life? It starts at the absolute micro level. Shufeng suggests we make sure these specific, super basic phrases, hello, I'm sorry, and thank you, frequently grace our lips. And let's be real, sometimes squeezing out a genuine I'm sorry feels way harder than running a marathon. But here's the catch, it can't just be lip service. The crucial second half of this is that you have to keep humility, kindness, and integrity deeply rooted in your heart while you say them. It's all about aligning those everyday outward expressions with real internal sincerity.
From those basic little words, the text draws a very clear line in the sand about our daily behaviors. On one hand, you've got the stuff we absolutely must avoid, acting arbitrarily, indulging in selfishness, getting sucked into arguments and quarreling. And on the flip side, we have what we should be striving for, understanding, patience, sincerity, and goodwill toward others. You'll notice pretty quickly that the negative behaviors are entirely self-centered, whereas the positive virtues actually require us to open up and connect with the people around us.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Shufeng applies this binary view to our broader lifestyle choices. Look at this stark contrast. He argues that luxury, wastefulness, and arrogance will literally corrode and ruin your spirituality. It's like a spiritual decay. Conversely, embracing simplicity, purity, and humility offers just boundless benefits. The whole idea is that the environment you cultivate and the resources you choose to consume have a direct, undeniable impact on the health of your inner life.
Which brings us to one of the most counterintuitive, yet totally game-changing rules in the entire text. Listen to this. The smaller the task, the more you should aim for the highest standard. I mean, wow, think about that for a second. We usually reserve our absolute best efforts for our biggest, flashiest projects, right? But this philosophy completely flips the script. It argues that when you're doing tasks, the smallest chores, the ones we usually just rush through on autopilot, are exactly where we need to pursue excellence and apply our highest standards.
And you know, this high standard applies incredibly strictly to how we communicate with each other. The text actually lays out a very structured approach to speech. First up, ensure your words are meaningful and truthful. They've got to be grounded in reality. Second, avoid empty talk and exaggeration. Basically, don't inflate the truth just to make yourself look a little better. And third, and this is a big one, eliminate self-deception. Because honestly, if you're constantly exaggerating to others, you're ultimately lying to yourself.
So why does all this crazy micro-level attention even matter? Well, as the source notes, the simpler a matter seems, the more attention it actually deserves. Shufeng beautifully connects this idea straight to our relationships. He points out that the people closest to you are the ones who influence the joys and sorrows of your life the absolute most. We kind of have this habit of taking simple matters and our closest family or friends for granted, right? Yet, they're the primary drivers of our everyday happiness. Now, to truly improve those relationships and our daily actions, we have to take a hard look inward. I want you to consider the striking metaphor from the text, the hardest mountains and rivers to overcome are those of ego and rigid opinions. This completely shifts our perspective. It tells us that the ultimate massive roadblocks in your life aren't external enemies or some streak of bad luck. Nope. The impassable geography blocking your progress is actually your own human ego and your stubborn refusal to change your mind.
So, The crucial point is understanding exactly where our negative emotions are actually coming from. Xufeng directly links our everyday pain and fear to these internal rigidities. The text explains that pain and fear don't just randomly happen to us, they originate from our attachment to the self and our biased perceptions. When we cling way too tightly to our own little perspective, we become terrified of anything that challenges it. And naturally, we suffer when the real world doesn't neatly conform to our biases. But let's be realistic. It is a very natural human tendency to cling to our biases, which makes going through tough times incredibly difficult. So, that really begs the question, when life inevitably gets hard and throws a wrench in the works, how does the text actually suggest we handle adversity? Because, hey, it's super easy to be humble and say thank you when everything is going your way. What's the practical guidance for navigating true hardships? Let's take a look. The source gives us these specific, highly actionable instructions. Number 1, do not halt your progress. Forward momentum is absolutely key. You just have to keep moving, no matter how tiny the step is. Number 2, refrain from blaming the heavens or the earth. The text demands a complete rejection of playing the blame game. And number 3, let go of anger and resentment. If you're in a tough spot, stopping to point fingers or just stewing in anger is only going to anchor you to the adversity. You have to drop the baggage if you want to keep walking.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the intensely visceral language Xufeng uses to describe what happens when we don't let go of that baggage. He says, jealousy and complaints are like cancer to the soul. That is heavy. They don't just sit there benignly, they actively multiply and destroy your spirituality from the inside out. The text insists we have to eradicate these toxins, because it's only with an open, expansive heart that you can step into what Xufeng calls vast and boundless realms.
And if you want to reach those boundless realms, you've got to do the work. This philosophy entirely rejects the idea of a quick fix. You must not seek shortcuts or covet petty gains. Trying to cheat the system or looking for some slight, selfish advantage over somebody else just completely ruins the practice. Instead, the clear mandate here is to be honest, genuine, and absolutely steadfast in fulfilling your everyday responsibilities. Essentially, your daily duty is your spiritual path.
And the beautiful thing is, if you can maintain that kind of steadfastness, the results are deeply organic. They compound over time. I absolutely love this closing imagery from the text. Work diligently every day. Trees grow into forests. It perfectly illustrates the macro result of all these micro actions. Think about it. A single thank you, a brief moment of patience, a tiny chore done perfectly. Those are just single trees. But when you accumulate them diligently over time, they grow into a massive, thriving ecosystem. Which finally brings us to the ultimate promise of Guide Xufeng's teachings. Here is how that thought beautifully concludes. And small, consistent efforts will ultimately make you a sage. You don't magically become a sage overnight through some sudden lightning bolt awakening. You become one through the relentless, consistent effort of mastering your daily living. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. If the simplest melody truly requires the most rigorous training, which basic note of your life are you going to start practicing today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep practicing, and I'll catch you next time.